Hi, this is Peter Purcell.
And Bill Aimone.
We're back on our Jog On podcast series, and today we wanted to dive a little deeper on a topic we covered in our last podcast.
Yeah, last podcast we talked about cost reduction and how different companies respond when they start seeing, I'll call it the cliff coming, where they know they are going to have to cut costs to meet either stockholder or board member or owner expectations. We gave some examples, we talked through some of them, and then we wrapped up with a quick discussion around how to actually address and be proactive and address cost-cutting efforts and do it the right way. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so Bill, in the last podcast, you talked about top-down, bottom-up, and we started to get into that a hair. Why don't you start with, top-down? What does that really mean? Because most people would say, oh yeah, top-down's easy, cut 15%.
Well, yeah, and here's the deal. Here's the problem. Most companies, when they have to go through a cost-cutting effort, they do exactly what you just described. They say, okay, well, I'm going to just tell everybody that for the budget for next year, we're going to cut 5% out of everybody's budget, just across the board. And we all know if you don't figure out where that's coming from, or where the money's going to come from, or why you're doing it, or what are we cutting back on, those costs end up creeping back in, and those aren't real cost reductions. So your question was, what do we mean by top down? Because what we're advocating is a combined top-down, bottoms-up approach for addressing costs in the organization. So to start with tops down, because you were kind of asking that, right?
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of reading between the lines, but top-down isn't just let's go revisit our strategy and tell everybody to cut costs, but maybe it's more about what do we do for the back office type functions, maybe?
Well, it's really starting off with looking at the company's strategy and then looking at, okay, what's sacred to our organization? What's important? What are the things we hold true to? What do we believe in? And let's say, for example, you're a retail store and you believe in high-quality stores. Well, you're not going to go cut back on merchandising and that type of thing.
So, okay, I got that. So if you're an oil field services company, you could say, hey, we want to make sure that we focus on profitable lines of business.
Or a high-quality fleet.
Or a high-quality fleet.
So we're not going to go buy cheap equipment, right?
Right, exactly. So what you may do is you may want to retire stuff. So it goes beyond just cutting people.
It's focusing on what assets you want to focus on. So, for example, if you're a large drilling company and you own and you're focused on having high-spec rigs, deep water rigs, you may look and say part of our cost-cutting effort is to divest of our shallow water, low-spec rigs. So that might be another example from a strategy perspective. But then it also goes into what are the things that we do well for our customers. So perhaps it's a high customer touch. Well, anything that has a high customer touch, we're not going to want to cut back on. So once you've figured out what those things are that are important to the organization, then you say, okay, everything else is fair game.
Is fair game, right.
So that's where you're going into the back office question of, and in a lot of cases, the back office is where the costs are lurking and where the opportunities are.
Right. And so once you set the strategy, once you figure out what's important to you, then you go about and you focus in on getting rid of everything else. Would you also...
Well, I mean, that's rather draconian, getting rid of everything else. Oh, come on, Peter.
Yeah.
The reality is really challenging the work that's being done in the, I'll call it, less strategic areas of the company. So, for example, looking at support within the organization, look at field support. And let's say you have a centralized field support group, but you also have local support and supporting operations. Well, are there opportunities there to actually rationalize what the two groups are doing and find a way to combine it and maybe cut one of them or cut one of them in half? Those are the things I'm talking about.
No, I got you. I was just joking. But
this is not a laughing matter, Peter.
Well, if you don't laugh at this, you can't laugh at anything.
I know. I'm giving you a hard time.
I know. But the bottom line is, it sounds like, the asset stuff doesn't sound so scary, right? It doesn't sound quite so overwhelming. What about the organization? I mean, you just talked about rationalizing organizations and stuff like that. How do people go about doing that quickly and effectively?
Well, here's the problem that we have today. We have this middle management problem in most companies where very heavy middle management, maybe they've been around a long time, maybe they're in the baby boomer generation, and they're holding on to a lot of old processes. And then there's some, I'll call it the millennials or the younger people, Generation Z, moving in who want to advance in those positions, but they're being held back. And so you have a generational gap there. And then you move up to the top of the organization. So there needs to be a tie back from this tops down to the bottom of the organization to really understand what needs to take place. So when we talk about organization, it's really rationalizing the layers in the organization. I know it sounds like you've heard it all before. We need to flatten the organization, but really taking a hard look at, do I have people out there who have one or two people reporting to them? Do I have people out there who have too many people reporting to them? So really rationalizing the reporting relationships in the span of control. And in one of our articles, we talked about how to rationalize I'll call it the vice president level, and putting what level of fiduciary responsibility do they have? What level of risk control do they have? What level of decision making do they have, and strategic decision making do they have in the company? And really looking at that and rationalizing those roles. Invariably, what you'll find in most organizations, they've got too many of these vice presidents who are really just middle managers who've been around the organization a long time, and they just got promoted to keep them around.
Well, so that begs a question of taking a look at processes, right? I mean, what I'm hearing is it sounds like you're going to have to get your processes straight and understand who's responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted.
You're talking about
and who
the
should be informed.
Accountability matrix.
Right. And that's one way to help determine if you have too many people accountable or too many people responsible in a duplicate form. Why do you have them all, right? And that's what happens at the VP level.
Well, and here's the source of all the problems is when a company decides to have a matrix organization. And we all know matrix organizations are not straightforward, they're complex, and there's this dual accountability. For example, I might have someone who's a country manager who reports to I'll call it a hemisphere manager, who then also reports to a operations chief operating officer too. So there's this dual reporting relationship that a lot of companies have, and there's this false sense of security in it. They think that's providing some teamwork, but really it doesn't. It provides conflict and lack of accountability, because who's responsible for the country P&L? Is it the chief operating officer, or is it the hemisphere vice president? Until you straighten out the organization and the structure, and there's a lot of new trends in different types of organizations and everything, but really first thing is get rid of the matrix. That's what we always tell people. Get rid of the matrix as most you can. And if you do that, that's a good first step.
That's awesome. So once you kind of get the strategy in place, you've taken a hard look at your assets, you've attacked processes, which we sort of discussed briefly, and then reorganized, right, and right-size your organization structure. Are you done?
No, you're not done. I mean, so what we just talked about here was kind of the top-down approach. Figure out what's important and hold that aside. Everything else is up for grabs. Take a look at the organization's structure, roles, responsibilities, as you alluded to, the accountability. Get rid of the matrix. Then that's the tops down side of it. Then it doesn't stop there.
By the way, I'm going to pause for a second here. We typically find, or
if you pause, then nobody will hear anything.
But yeah, that's true. But based on my experience, and I'm one of those boomers, right? Most consulting
Sorry to
firms.
Offend you.
It's actually a compliment. Yes, sir. But most consulting firms that I have worked for in the past, they'd stop there. That's why I say, are you done? So what's next?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Peter. And I do.
That's the leading question.
Very
right?
respectful to you, your baby boomerness. But going back to that's the tops downside we talked about. And that's where a lot of organizations do stop. You're right. And the next piece of this is the bottoms up, and that can actually happen at the same time. And really understanding grassroots, what's needed to run the organization, what's necessary to make things happen. And that's where executives lose a lot of line of sight into what is actually happening out there in my operations that's working well, what's not working well. Where is corporate getting in the way of getting things done? And I'm not talking about corporate saying, oh, you need an approval for something. I'm talking about just them asking for information just to get information to justify jobs. And then what support is are the operations getting? So there's a model that we prescribe to that really focuses on, and we always bring this up. We're working with a company, and we say, okay, let's suppose you're a restaurant chain. That's an easy example. And you're going to run a restaurant. What support do you need from the corporate office? So that's really asking the what do you really need? And then figuring out, okay, if I just own one restaurant, how many people in the back office would I need? And so let's suppose you said, well, I really need 2. But then I have a 5,000 restaurant chain, so that means I need 10,000 people in the corporate office, but I really have 50,000 in the corporate office.
Right.
There's a math problem there.
A huge math problem.
And so really understanding what do the people out there in the field really need from the corporation to run their operation efficiently and run it better.
Right, and reduce their demands. I mean, I remember being out at a field service yard, and a manager complaining that he spent more time responding to corporate requests for information than actually running his business.
Right, but then on the flip side, they do need help from the corporation, and so you need to ask them, okay, where are the areas you need the most help, and then how can corporate respond better? And on that note, I'm going to break to our sponsor, Evan 360, who actually has a solution for that.
This episode is sponsored by Evan 360, a revolutionary platform where employees can get help requests answered by an expert in minutes without the wait. Traditional ticketing systems and call centers are unpredictable, and it's not unusual for tickets to get lost or forgotten. But with Evan 360, employees can access internal and external support experts instantly through one central hub. Evan 360 eliminates support delays and improves workplace productivity, employee engagement, and customer satisfaction. To make Evan 360 your company's hub for immediate problem solving, visit evan360.com.
Talking about that support model, how is corporate supporting the operations? Because there are things that operations need answer to questions. Let's say it's a human resources question. There's a risk component of that, and they need some expertise from someone for a difficult situation, and they need it now. Somebody's got an employee problem they need help with, or maybe there's a technical problem with the systems out there.
Or
in the
engineer.
field.
You know, I've got a problem and I need to contact the right engineer.
Yeah, maybe in a more of an industrial company, I have a manufacturing plant, right? And I need an engineer to help me with the product.
Right, the plant's down, middle of the night. How do I get the right engineer to call me back or contact me and get the plant running?
Or this product order we have doesn't quite fit our configuration, and we need someone to provide some expertise, and I need it now, and we got to get this order out. How are they responding and supporting them? So really getting that support model down and rationalizing that. And then, so I've done that bottoms up. I've gone down out to the field. I've talked to the plants. I've talked to the people in the stores. I've talked to people in the field, someone on a rig maybe, if it's an oil and gas drilling company. Talking to someone on the rig, and what do you need? And we've been through this before where sometimes they just say, look, I need these 3 things and that's it. And I need them now and fast. And you go, okay, great. Go back to corporate and we look at all the things they're doing for them.
And they're not doing those things.
They're doing 2 of the 3, and they're doing 40 other things. So let's go back and look at those 40 other things that they don't need anymore. That's the other piece of it. But the other thing we saw, and you alluded to this a minute ago, was requests. Corporate asking them for requests. Peter, how many times have you seen corporate calling up a field, asking them a question, and the person in the field has to go into the corporate data warehouse to get the answer for them? I mean,
all the time.
How ridiculous is that?
Yeah, all the time. Or they get a call and they're asked for HR information, and then they have to go into the corporate HR system to get it out. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, this happens in every organization. Every organization has inefficiencies, and every organization has an opportunity to cut costs. And largely, and early on we were talking about assets, but the biggest cost in most companies are people.
Right.
And it sounds rather draconian, but really a lot of these companies really need to go through, I'll call it a rationalization of their workforce. because they've got to be competitive. And we look at companies that are concerned over cost competitiveness and trade wars. Well, here's one way to address it, right?
Right. So let's dive a little deeper into this people thing. And the reason why I bring that up is, I think everybody that listens to us, they get a good handle on assets.
All 3 or 4 people that listen to us.
Maybe 5. Come on. Let's be nice. Or 3. You're right. But bottom line
or
is,
listen to us this long.
Yeah, this
2
long.
or 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. We're at the 15-minute mark, just to let you guys know. We'll be off in 5. So, but the bottom line is that when you talk about assets, that feels kind of easy to deal with. When you talk about processes in today's world, it feels kind of easy. When you even talk about reorganization, I mean, the way that you describe it and the way we help our clients, it's a doable thing. When you start talking about keeping employees happy, it's not about bring your dog to work day. It's not about buying them T-shirts, to say I am, the greatest employee on earth.
Ping pong tables.
Or ping pong tables and pool tables in buildings. It seems to me that if I'm an employee, what would make me the happiest is obviously give me a good job, which everything that we've talked about says we're going to give you as good a job experience as possible. But it's that next thing, which is job experience, getting help, and that kind of thing. What are you seeing in the market today?
Well, let's back up for just 1 second there, because you said something about you're talking about the employee experience. There's a couple components to it, right?
Right.
There's I'm doing something meaningful.
Right.
Okay. And by default, most people know in a company whether they're doing something meaningful or not.
Right.
If they're not doing something meaningful, they're probably not happy with their job. And if they're not doing something meaningful, it's probably not adding value to the organization. And so by taking those cost reduction
steps, you got that.
You take care of that, but you also, what you do is you give people have meaningful jobs that they realize they're making a difference. Then I think you're alluding into now that I've got people doing meaningful stuff,
how do I keep them happy at the company? Because a lot of companies can come and say, I can give you meaningful work. I mean, there's stories after stories, or give them an extra $1 an hour and they'll move. So if you look at, explain to me what you think or what you suggest the other components of the employee experience are, and what are some innovative ways that companies can take advantage of to bolster that piece?
Well, I mean, that all falls into the category of employee experience, right? And how do I give people the best experience when they come to work? And there's a couple components. One is making their life easy from a support perspective and getting the support they need. And the other component of it is the cultural component of, am I giving them autonomy to make decisions? Am I giving them the ability to learn and explore other opportunities, be it rotational assignments and that type of thing? I think it also goes back to where are people spending their time and what they're doing. And we did a research study not long ago where we asked over about 60 different large companies, we asked people the question of how much time do they spend trying to solve a problem or waiting for someone to answer their problem that they have so they can get back to work. And the variability was high in response. You have people saying they spent a day doing that a week, but the average was 3 hours a week. So if you look at that and you say,
that's annoying.
An employee spending 3 hours a week waiting for somebody else to help them with something that if they could just get the right person, in front of them to help them, they can get back to work.
And so these things, when the study was done, Bill, what were the components? What were they waiting for? Was it IT help? Was it I just need help from HR answering a question about benefits? It's hey, finance, give me an answer for what my P&L was last week. I mean, what?
Well, Peter, we talked to different people in different industries, from
right.
healthcare to manufacturing to retail, and people in different jobs, people in accounting, sales. It was all over the board. Human resources, a lot of it was human resources, a lot of it was IT, a lot of it was actual kind of company policy general type stuff that they just didn't know who to go to, but there was someone either in HR, finance, IT, or even in supply chain that could answer their question. It might be a policy question, or it might be an outside contractor that can answer it. So really what a lot of the company's issues is if I can take those problems, nobody likes to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. DMV, what comes to mind? Wait
right? Wait in line.
IT help desk, what comes to mind?
Wait,
right?
Even calling HR, wait. You're on the phone.
Or you're calling your cable guy to come out and do something.
To wait.
Wait. People hate waiting. So if you can take the wait equation out of people's jobs, so if you take 3 hours a week out of someone's job where they can actually be more productive and provide a value to the company and maybe take it down to 30 minutes instead of 3 hours, If you're a 1,000-person organization,
that's a lot of money. You could cut a lot of cost if you could streamline that.
That's millions of dollars to back to productivity.
Okay.
So that's just another way to do it. And there's applications out there like our sponsor Evan 360 that provides that, and there's ways to get there and do it pretty quickly and easily. But again, it's don't forget the culture component and around the employee experience too. That's important too.
Well, thanks, Bill. I mean, it's been a great conversation. So we talked about top down, bottom up. We dove a little bit deep into one of the bottom things, but I think it was very useful.
Yeah, understand it's a combination of top. Don't do one and not the other, because you can go out and talk to a bunch of people in the field, and you can learn a lot about the organization. And what's interesting is when you do go out and talk to people, they tell you more than you imagine. It becomes very interesting. But having that combined approach and then meeting in the middle, the real value out of that, though, is the employees feel like they've been heard. Number one. Number two, this change sticks because you're actually getting real information from the field. You're not just supposing from the ivory tower saying we can do X, Y, Z. You're actually getting real information from the field that can be validated against your company and what's important to the organization.
Cool. Well, Bill, thanks for your time. And again,
thank you for your time, Peter.
Yeah, boomer time. Bottom line is, if any of our listeners have a question, you can email Bill at bill@trinergy.com.
Or Peter at trinergy.com.
There you go. Thanks, guys.